Hi, I'm Randy, that Geeky Maker, and today we're going to make the Triforce from the Legend of Zelda. I've been a huge video game fan almost my entire life, and one of my favorite video game series going all the way back to the original on the Nintendo Entertainment System is The Legend of Zelda. And now if it's possible, both of my sons are bigger video gamers than I ever was, and they've also enjoyed playing the Legend of Zelda series. On a recent vacation, my son purchased this really cool handmade stoneware ocarina. An ocarina is a wind instrument that's played by the main character Link in the game. It's got the Legend of Zelda symbol on it right there, the Triforce. And he tried to learn how to play it for a while, then eventually he got bored with it and kind of threw it in a drawer and went back to his Nintendo. And I thought it was way too cool to just be sitting in a drawer, so I decided to make a frame for him so he could hang it on the wall. And the frame is going to be made in the shape of the Legend of Zelda symbol, the Triforce. It's going to be made out of walnut, and this is going to be my very first project where I try to pour some resin. Let's get started. Maybe I should learn how to play this. I'm going to start by cutting down a piece of walnut to the width that I need. This piece should provide me with 9 pieces so that I can make all 3 triangles. Now comes the tricky part. A miter saw only goes up to 45 degrees, but in order to make these triangles, I need 60-degree angles. So I went ahead and made this block at 30 degrees, and I'm going to set my miter saw to 30 degrees, and those two added together will give me the 60-degree cuts that I need. There's my 60-degree angle on one side. Unfortunately, the fence will prevent me from actually putting the piece in and cutting the other side, so I'm going to have to cut all the pieces down to size first, and then make the cut on the other side. After making all of the cuts on one side, I created this stop block and attached it to the block so that I could ensure that all the pieces would be the same size when I cut the other angle. Unfortunately, making cuts like this left my fingers a lot closer to the blade than I was comfortable with. As much as I hate to admit it, the annoying safety robot here is probably correct in this case. Normally I consider the miter saw to be one of the safest tools in the shop. It doesn't scare me the way the table saw does. That's because the force of the blade is pushing in the opposite direction, and you've got your piece braced up against the fence, so that when you bring the blade down, you really don't feel much. But in this case, between the 30-degree block that I've got the piece rested up against, and the fact that the saw is at a 30-degree angle to get 60 degrees, I can actually feel the blade trying to pull the piece out of my grip and shoot it in between the two fences. And that kind of scares me a bit. So from now on, I'm going to solve that by actually screwing the pieces into the block, which I have fastened down to the miter saw with some double-sided tape. And it makes it much safer. I really like my fingers. While this took a little bit longer, it did make the process a whole lot safer. Unfortunately, it left me with a whole bunch of holes that I have to plug. Here I'm using my drill press with a plug cutter to make plugs to fill all those holes. Now I just need to simply add some glue and tap the plugs in place. For the other side, the holes are small enough that the sawdust from the sanding will cover up the holes when it sticks to the glue. I can use my belt sander to sand the excess plugs off. Later I'm going to be pouring some gold resin into a groove in the middle of each triangle. So in order to do that, I have to cut these grooves on the router table. In order to ensure that it's exactly centered in the middle of each piece of wood, I'm cutting one side and then flipping it over and cutting the other side. This will ensure that the groove is perfectly centered in the middle of each piece. Well, unfortunately, power tools can sometimes be unpredictable. I never actually had this happen to me before though, and it had to happen on the last cut of the last piece. My router bit actually just broke. It just broke right as I was making the cut. Just broke right off of there. So I'm gonna have to order a new one, and while I wait for that, I'll just glue up the other 2 triangles.
Now it's time to glue up all the triangles. After adding glue to all the surfaces, I line them all up, and then I use the string and block method to clamp them together until the glue dries. I've been wanting to use resin in one of my projects for a long time, and I'm finally getting around to doing it. First, I'm going to add some gold powder to the resin before adding the hardener to it. After thoroughly mixing in the color and the hardener, I'm ready for my first resin pour. Here we go! Wait, hold on a second. This just doesn't seem like the right kind of music for pouring resin. Now it's time to add some finish, but before I do that, I'm masking off the bottom of the wood so there won't be any finish where I need to add glue so I can glue it to the backing later. Here I'm using my usual finish of boiled linseed oil mixed with polyurethane. This really makes the wood look beautiful, and best of all, it's not smelly. Now it's time to glue the triangles down to the backing piece, which I've painted gold with some spray paint. It's a little bit tricky to get these all arranged perfectly while they're moving, so I'm gluing them down one at a time and letting them dry individually before trying to glue down the next one. As you can see, I'm once again making good use of my 1, 2, 3 blocks, using them as weights to clamp this down while the glue dries. Once all 3 triangles are dry, I can use my router with a pattern cutting bit to cut off the excess backer board. With the way I've done this, you're going to be able to see the excess backer board sticking out from the side of the frame, but I'll solve that later by either beveling it or painting it gold. Now I need a way to attach the ocarina to the middle of the frame while still making it removable. So once again, I'm going to be using magnets for this purpose. After supergluing a magnet in place and covering it up with a piece of plastic, I can then take the other magnet that's going to stick to it and fasten that to the back of the ocarina with some epoxy. Unfortunately, the curved shape of the ocarina and the height of the magnet are making it so it has a huge gap which doesn't allow it to sit straight. So to solve that, I'm gluing one more piece of plastic on there for it to rest against. Now it's just a matter of mixing up some epoxy, coating the back of the magnet on it, and resting the ocarina on it until the epoxy dries. That actually worked better than I thought. The ocarina sits on there nice and secure, and it won't come off unless you decide to pull it off. Now I just need to secure the magnetic holder onto the frame with a couple of screws. I'm using this bit to countersink the screw holes so that the screws will lie flush with the back of the frame. With that screwed in place, the frame is ready to hang on my son's wall. Let me see if I've gotten the hang of this thing. And there it is. Once it was hung on the wall, my son also realized that it was a great place for him to store his Legend of Zelda amiibo figures. I hope you enjoyed watching this project, and if you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. We'll see you next time.